It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we have a really, really special show because we have a guest. Joining us today for this very special episode is Kurt Emhoff, Esquire. He has been a manager. He is a lawyer. And most importantly, he has a terrific podcast called the Boxing Esquire Podcast. Now, if you want access to all of the things that they're going to talk about today, you're going to need to subscribe because about half the show will be behind a paywall. But this is a big one and you're going to want it all. John, Kurt, so nice to have you both. I'm going to turn it over to you, John.
Well, thank you. Hey, Kurt, that, you know what, is as good as intro as that was. I think she undersold your credentials. So for our MMA fans that are not aware, Kurt, I do believe you have a JD from some New York university, right?
Cardozo, yes. Cardozo
and then did you graduate also with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology or something from Pennsylvania?
I did. Penn State University.
Jesus,
yes.
Look at you. And I got no college degree. I'm the working class hero here. And as an attorney and a manager in boxing, you've been doing for several decades now. Your clients were what? Corey Spanks, Paulie Malignaggi, Peter Kid Chocolate, Luis Collazo. And if I recall, I think you mentioned this to me once, you got Teran Millet. I can't remember how to pronounce his name.
Teran Millet.
Teran Millet, that's it. Against Zab Judah back in the, 2000 or something like that. That was one of your first big cases. So
yeah. Listen, in recent years, I've done a little bit of work for Edgar Berlanga and Alicia Baumgartner's promoter. I've done work for Marlon Esparza. I've done work for people who fought, in the last decade as well.
Yeah, well, I'm going off the stuff that we talked about in the past. We always mention the old fights.
Sure.
But I just wanted to make sure people know you are well versed for decades. You've been enmeshed in the boxing world. You've written for various sites. You have your Boxing Esquire podcast, which I hope people listen to when I'm on, for frick's sake. And we thought you'd be perfect to bring on here to talk about. We are going to talk about what's going on in boxing right now because there's a pretty big story. And as big as it's kind of hit the boxing world, it seems almost undersold by a lot of people, I think. It's not as much as it's getting attention. I think it's still not getting as much attention as it probably deserves. And that would be the introduction to the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act that just got introduced into Congress. It's proposed legislation, hasn't been voted on. Nothing's happened yet, but it's proposed legislation. And I guess my first question, we should tell people, first of all, there's been this amends previous legislation. So what was the Professional Boxing Safety Act of 1996, which just amends, and the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act of 2000, which this has a big impact on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
and I don't need to go nuts. I just kind of a brief summary for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, boxing, of course, has never had a league or a standard set of rules or rules for, there's rules for conduct in the ring that basically in the U.S., the state commissions, all 50 or how many there are commissions in kind of have their own rules, and it's, the rules differ. So the Medical Safety Act or Boxing Safety Act, I should say, was really more designed at fighter safety and having some sort of system where commissions would communicate with each other and
some uniform standards.
Uniform standards and having a suspension list. That was like the big one. So that if a fighter was suspended in one state, other states would know about it and not have that fighter fight while he was on suspension. that was pretty much, uniform standards and safety as the act implies. That was kind of what the 96 Act was about. The 2000 Muhammad Ali Act, I mean, you really could have called it the Don King and Sanctioning Organization Deterrence Act, because it basically went after some of the more like nefarious practices in the sport, like Don, taking long-term options on fighters, taking options on number one contenders, sanctioning bodies, of course, having poor ratings that didn't make any sense. Don King also having making all these deductions from fighters' paychecks. So that act kind of tried to limit options and take away options on mandatories and have the promoter disclose where they're getting revenue from and how much it is, and tried to set up some sort of uniformity, some criteria for ratings.
Yep.
So that's
tried's the key word.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How much the bill actually succeeded in changing the sport is certainly up for debate. But those were kind of the.
Well, that's what we're here. That's what we're here for. We're gonna debate some of that, I think. But so I guess for the short end for both this is the 1996 bill was for the health and safety of boxers. That was the general purpose, and the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act was looked at the economic protections of boxing. That was the intent more than anything else. There was other intent. That was the primary intent, to kind of give boxers a chance to, because they've been so exploited for so long. And it's been called, I mean, you hear everybody says it's a failure all the time, that it doesn't work. So I guess the parts that, let's go over first the parts that you think have been abject failures in the Ali Act. And I'm thinking the most obvious are like the obligations required of the sanctioning organizations and for contract minimums. I think those are the two biggest standards, that they were supposed to have, rules for the sanctioning organizations, their ratings, and they were supposed to have minimum contract standards. And those ended up being just suggestions and no obligations. And I thought that was the two biggest failures. But in your eyes, what was the biggest weakness of the Ali Act? Well, I guess lack of enforcement might be the other one. But
that's what I'd say. I'd say lack of enforcement. Obviously from both the state and the U.S. attorneys general who were given the power to enforce it. But I remember the former president of the ABC, Tim Lukenhoff. I remember him complaining. I think it was an article by Tom Hauser years ago. I mean, just because the Ali Act's been there since 2000, but basically he was saying that he had forwarded clear violations of the Ali Act to state attorneys general in like Wyoming for because they don't have a commission, but there were still fights going on. So he recommended to the state AG to do something about it. Nothing happened. There was illegal tough man contest in Alabama. He recommended to the Alabama, U.S. attorney, to do something about it. Nothing got done. So basically, the state AGs and the federal AGs have basically said to the ABC, we have better things to do. We're not going to enforce it. We know it's federal law. But we're not going to basically spend a dime or any time enforcing it. So that was a big disappointment, because I think a big point of the bill was when the sanctioning bodies do something horrific, that there would be legal consequences. Coming from the U.S. government or a state government, but none of that happened. The objective ratings criteria. The ABC drafted it, and the sanctioning bodies pretty much each of them kind of adopted it, at least put it in their rules. But the rubber kind of met the road when there was a case in 2005, I think, with Vladimir Klitschko, where he had beaten DeVera Williamson. And then, maybe half a year later, Williamson had beaten someone else, and, the IBF had Williamson leapfrog Klitschko in the ratings. And it made absolutely no sense, other than the fact that, of course, Williamson was with Don King. So at this point in time, Emhoff was still kind of activist and, very, very, trying to get the Ali Act to have some teeth. And they actually had an appeals process with the ABC, but realizing that Congress had, dealt them kind of a dummy hand and basically given them no power, the appeals process with the ABC was non-binding. So Klitschko went through that, and they found, Klitschko should be rated ahead of Williamson. They ended up suing in federal court, and the judges basically said, this doesn't look good, but the courts are not going to get into the business of rating fighters. You look at the IBF and the other organizations; they all have different fighters rated. You look at even the leading publications in the business; they have different people rated. So it's an objective, process. Courts are not going to be, basically getting into the internal decisions of private organizations was I think something like that in the language. So that pretty much put the kibosh on the objective ratings criteria that there was going to be no change in the sanctioning bodies.
Well, there was a proposal. Well, I mean, we're going to get into this later, I'm sure. There was a proposal by McCain and others to fix the sanctioning organization problem in a later amendment bill. But nothing on there was no teeth behind the one that they applied to the the Ali Act, because
precatory language. Anytime they said, it is the sense of Congress that someone, may do something or should do something, but doesn't have to do something. It's just like, it's wishful thinking. It's not binding.
Yeah. So that's the big failures. I guess the success is, one, I think, it's not a massive success, but no one's enforcing it except the boxers themselves, because of the right of private action. So because it included a right of private action, there has been a few cases of boxers, bringing up complaints to the Ali Act. Now, maybe not a lot of them go all the way to court. We don't have a lot of precedent because we don't have a lot of decisions, but some of them are so clear cut. My understanding is so clear cut that people settle immediately when it's filed, because it's like, I violated it. Let's end this case. But then that's limited mostly to boxers that have the resources to file a case.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's been some case law, and I think, and I'm trying to think of the name of the heavyweight who got the verdict against Greg Cohen. I think that was like one of the few where there was actually some, even if it was like a very modest payout, there was money damages for something in an Ali Act suit. So Milges, right? Milges.
We all were going through that, because that's the case, right? That kind of leaked that sanctioning organizations might be taking bribes. Isn't that the one?
No, that was the promoter. No, it was a different case.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. That's more recent one I'm thinking of. But there's also Eccles v. Palulo, right? That's another case that went to an Ali Act case, if I remember right.
Yeah, where there's a decision. There's been a couple of them. Muskayev was involved in one that kind of set the statute of limitations for it, and Lacey had one where the judge recommended that the disclosures come at the time of negotiation as opposed to when they actually come. But unfortunately, that judge's opinion hasn't really done much in terms of the timing of the disclosures.
Well, okay. So here's the other ones I think have been kind of moderately successful to very successful about the Ali Act, and the ones that I think a lot of people miss, or at least some of them missed, is and I should ask, rate each of these, I guess. The disclosure requirements, that's been, we can debate how successful that's been, but the firewall between promoters, managers, the firewall between promoters and sanctioning organizations, and then the ban on coercive contracts. So of those, I mean, I kind of rate all of them as at least minor successes, if not very big successes. But how do you rate those?
You know what? Just as someone who's been out, boots on the ground and negotiating this stuff, I would say the coercive contracts one, and then there's a couple elements of the coercive contracts one, right? There's the not taking options for more than a year. That one in negotiations, I've definitely had promoters try to take more than that. And when I point out that it violates the Ali Act, I usually can rein them in. So that one just, anecdotally has been a success, I would say. That one's actually. And
also the mandatory one really is effective, isn't it? That
was exactly what I was going to get to. Yeah, you don't see, because, I think coerce, the 12-month one, I think that's section 10A, and then 10B is the mandatory contenders, where you can't take options on mandatory contenders, which definitely, it frees up, it makes things more competitive, John. Knowing the antitrust guy that you are, that in and of itself is definitely something that discourages monopoly in boxing.
And that was intentional.
The fact that a promoter cannot control the title and just in perpetuity take options on the number one contenders.
Yeah, I think people miss how intentional that was too, because if you look at the legislative history, if you go to even the testimony about the Ali Act, there's a lot of discussions how the use of the champion, saying you want to fight the champion, fight for the belt, who I promote, you have to sign with me a multi-fight contract. And how that would lead to monopoly of weight divisions was specifically brought up in the legislation. And also they also link it back to the IBC of New York case, where that's what they did. They had the champion under contract. You wanted to contend and fight the champion. You had to sign a multi-fight contract with them, which is standard operating procedure in MMA, but in boxing has been since at least the Ali Act. And my understanding is from you and a bunch of people in the industry is that's probably the one part of the Ali Act that's been very effective because it's pretty clear cut. And so at the very least, promote people might try to put it in contracts, but if you point it out that they have to take it out, or I guess you could go to court afterwards, try to sue them and say they installed an illegal contract that violates federal law.
Right. Exactly. You could try and get it voided.
Yeah. Now the disclosure part, that's the one everybody brings up as the big thing in the Ali Act all the time, I notice. And I think that's been moderately successful, but I think that's one of the minor portions. That and the firewall between promoters and managers. The both those have been kind of successful, but I don't think those are nearly as important as the other aspects that I brought up that have been successful about the Ali Act.
I mean, I'd say the disclosures, I've definitely found it useful. You get different disclosures from different promoters. Some don't give them at all. And that's why, and they get sued often. But the ones who do disclose, some are better than others. But I'd say on the smaller shows, just to give an example, Broadway Boxing with Lou DiBella, when they gave their disclosures, I didn't know exactly what license fee they were getting from TV. I didn't know what they were getting in sponsorships. But, once I had an idea, once I got the Ali Act disclosure, now I knew what I was dealing with, now that put the negotiation on a much more equal playing field, Yeah. Assuming
it might not help you on that.
It won't help you for that fight because that's the thing that, the judge in the Lacey case was right. It would be a lot more useful to have all of the disclosures at the time you're negotiating. But in fact, in a sense, it doesn't make, for some fights, it wouldn't make sense, right? Because, oftentimes the promoter might come to the fighter and say, how much do you want to fight this guy? And then they'd have to go back to the network and try and get that money. So they when they initially come to negotiate a fight, it may not be cut and dried what they are getting in revenue. Sometimes they're still negotiating that. So it does make a little more sense that they have it, they do the disclosure closer to the fight where they actually have real numbers to give you. So I get that part, and as Pat English pointed out, for the most part, it's a bill that or this part of the bill, it's more for the next fight. It's more kind of general knowledge, so that what the networks are paying, and what kind of sponsorships promoters are bringing in.
Yeah. Well, what it does, it might not help that, like you said, that negotiation, but if you have a manager that's going to take part in multiple negotiations for you and other fighters, after a while, and probably because of his access to other management and other people in the industry, they will get an understanding of what the industry's paying for that kind of fighter. And
that's also very useful for negotiating promotional contracts too, not just like bout agreements. If you know what's in the kitty on each of these networks, for the most part, then that's going to color how you negotiate the promotional contract too. One other thing I want to mention, in terms of pros, and this one doesn't get enough credit, I don't think, is the ratings appeal process. It has, I think it's 11B where, and I just used this last year and I got a guy a title shot. It was actually wasn't even an American fighter. It was Leon Harth from Germany in the dreaded Bridgerweight division. A friend of mine, an attorney in Germany, contacted me, and Harth fought for the vacant title, got knocked out, but the guy he fought tested positive for PEDs. So according to the BA rules, he was supposed to go right back up to the leading available contender spot and fight for the vacant title. Well, that didn't happen. Some Russian promoter with a lot of money came in and got his guy in there. So we appealed the rating, and the WBA has the appeals process codified, like a lot of other things in the Ali Act. So they had to respond right away. It kind of got the ball rolling. Eventually, I got Harth. He didn't get a shot at the vacant title, but we made a deal that he got a shot at the winner. So he got his world title shot. But they had put him all the way down to number 9 in the ratings, and they didn't fix it when the guy tested positive and the commission called it a no contest. He didn't shoot right back up. So the fact that there was an appeals process, thank you, Ali Act, it started the ball rolling, and eventually, Harth got his second shot at the title. So that's, and I know there's also another attorney friend of mine who had a pretty prominent heavyweight these days who disappeared from the ratings magically 1 month. And, and he noticed that, and he filed an appeal, and his fighter was back in the ratings the following month. So they said it was an error.
Look at that. Well, it's the complaint.
Thank you, Ali Act. Thank you, John McCain.
So the complaint is it doesn't ever work. And I think there's, it's a mix. I think people miss it's a mixed bag, and it's maybe not as effective as it's supposed to be, but it does something. But the one part I think it really does is that coercive contract part and the separation between manager and promoter. Obviously we have corruption in boxing. We have people paying off sanctioned organizations under the table, finding ways to do it.
It's so funny, John. It's your Midwestern accent.
Yep.
When you say coercive, I always hear coercive contracts.
Oh, how dare you mock my part of America, the heartland of America.
Coercive contracts, folks, who are listening. It's coercive contracts.
Yeah,
yes.
The coercive is that not what I'm saying? Coercive contracts.
You say it, but you say it so fast. It sounds like coercive contracts.
Well, I speak fast for the smart people that can follow along. So, but the Ali Act, but the part I think people mostly miss is that the part that's really been successful is it's prevented monopoly. That's one of the intents. The idea is that you cannot, because you can't use these coercive contracts, you can't force an overwhelming body of fighters, a gravitational force of fighters in a weight class to sign with you, that suddenly the network effect takes over and you take over the industry. And then that goes to another part, is that it only impacts the United States. But I don't know about now, because I think the United States, we're going to get into that later about how bad the U.S. business is going right now for boxing. But the United States is, because it's historically been the biggest market by multiples, by more than the rest of the world combined for several decades, up until recently. Impacting the United States market was enough that would impact the global market, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, we still, we're like the biggest bank. I mean, well, okay, hold on. We're one of the bigger banks. I mean, now we got Turkey Al-Sheikh. Yeah. We were the biggest bank for, centuries. But now Saudi has gotten into it. We may not be the biggest bank, but we're definitely, a place that that traditionally has had networks that paid the most money for fights and venues that paid the most in gate. Probably still have that. So yeah, this is the place.
Most pay-per-views, the big, yeah.
Yeah, and we're the entertainment capital of the world. So yeah, it's the place to be.
So okay, now that was all prologue, because now we're getting to the heart of the show. We're going to talk about this new bill finally. And the first question, here's my first question that I don't think a lot of people are asking. Namely, when they introduced this bill, is what problems in boxing does the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act actually address? Because if you go through what are the problems of boxing? Everybody complains that the rankings are not good, right? That that there's not enough co-promotion. We don't see the big fights get made. Right. I'm trying to think, what are the other big problems the fans complain about boxing? Too many
champions,
too many titles, So then you look at this act. Does it address any of those in this act? It introduces new titles. It does not address the sanctuarization rankings at all. It introduces your own rankings, and it doesn't have any co-promotion. So I guess that's my first complaint about it is, what does it actually do? And I mean that addresses the problems. What does it do to address the problems that everybody says boxing has?
Right. Well, if you listen to these guys spin it, just to be devil's advocate, right? They're saying, well, listen, what we're proposing, nobody likes, the sanctioning bodies, who can, the boxing's insane. So we're going to introduce some sanity here. We're going to introduce a league, that where there's one champion, this is what boxing needs. We don't need four, crazy sanctioning bodies that are corrupt and fighters promote, or promoters fighting with each other all the time. Now we're going to have a league that, isn't going to have those problems.
I hope you're using air quotes every time you say league. We all know.
Yeah, we don't have the video on, but yeah, I'm air quoting like crazy.
Yeah, because they're not a league, but okay. But the other thing they try to pitch is like, it's an option, it's an alternate to the Ali Act system, the traditional system. Well, then you're not cleaning up the number of titles because you're introducing a new title that's alternative to the existing ones that can still exist. And so that's where I get lost. And then, let me move on a little bit because I have another question I was thinking about. Why do you think they're amending the Professional Boxing Safety Act and not the Ali Act?
I don't think they want to draw any attention to the Ali Act because it's basically, the only thing they say about the Ali Act, I think in the proposed bill, is that this is an alternative to complying with it, right? Let me see
But it's obviously amending it because the amendment does say that you have an alternative to the Ali Act.
Yeah, an alternative system for compliance with the requirements of this act. So, well, I mean, I think, the Ali Act kind of amended the Act of 1996. So in essence, they're talking about both acts. But yeah, I mean, they definitely don't want to mention the Ali Act too much because they're going to ignore it. That's. I mean, I do the same thing. I think that's smart. But I'm glad you said that because that's what I was thinking. Now, okay, let's go to the parts of the Ali Act that are probably less, not the Ali Act, but the new Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, the ARI Act. Someone's called it the ARI Act. Who was it called the ARI Act? I thought that was. No, I think I had another name for that one too. What do I want to call it? It's the TKO Monopsonization Enabling Act. That's what this is.
That's too long. I like the ARI Act. Very brief. But
the ARI gets another condo and Tahoe Act. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. But it includes pay minimums increased injury recovery, and certified judges and referees. Are these not good things, Kurt? Why are you against this bill that has these good things in it?
Yeah, it's great that, someone got a copy of the New York State, Athletic Commission rules and regs and just kind of, copied and pasted them for most of these requirements. This is all stuff that's in, commission rules in various places. Maybe not New York. I don't know.
Well, but now it's now again we're having it universal that there's standardization across the ABC. And I honestly,
all right, you could actually say that. You could actually say that. If you want to be a UBO, now you have standard rules for UBOs. So if 10 other promoters want to form UBOs, now we've got 10 people.
Well, we're gonna get the UBOs, but the pay minimums, the increased injury coverage, and the certified judges and referees, that applies to everybody, even the non-UBOs. Right. So for those, I honestly have no complaint. I think all those are fine. It's okay. Increase injury coverage. Okay, it's more than a lot of states, but I don't think it shouldn't kill people. And I think the pay minimum, maybe get rid of some of the bum fights people are putting on, wouldn't be bad. And so all that I can't complain. But now we get to the heart, which is really because the purpose of those I think were put into so they could point to something that's universally good that no one could bitch about, and make a cover for this other portion, which is
but really not make massive changes either. I mean, the 25 for med insurance is most states have 20 as it is. So another 5. I mean, it's good. Not gonna complain. But it's not gonna. It's not the type. Obviously, I think the ABC. This is where the ABC input might have been. Is someone sat down with them and said, "This is as high as you can go without hurting some of the state local promotions. Right. This is the most you can do." Right. I mean, listen. There are states like Kentucky that only have 5,000 for medical, and then like a 5,000 death benefit. So that pushing it to 25, is a fairly significant increase for them. But again, I don't know that the premiums are going to go up too much, and it's just for medical too. There's no increase of a death benefit. So
and the people listening that aren't aware that this is for the injury coverage when you get injured in the ring during a fight. So that's specific. It's broken what happens in the nose. The coma, whatever injury.
Or listen, most, if someone gets knocked out, they're concussed. Yeah, I mean, I've made the trip more than a few times to the hospital afterwards for the MRI afterwards. So those aren't cheap.
So no one's complaining about that. But then the part at the beginning of this act that's everybody should be focused on, and I think a lot of people might be underselling some of the impact of this, is the unified boxing organizations. And is this just bespoke legislation designed specifically for TKO? That's my actual question to you, because and I already know the answer, because you look at it, it seems very specific. The requirements that they have for this UBO line up exactly what the UFC already has. They have they have a health a place where fighters can train and get medicals and I can't remember the exact
training
wording.
And rehabilitation center, because every promoter should have one.
Exactly.
And now that they're proposing a league type structure, John, even though we both know that Dana White said this really isn't a league, it's just another boxing promotion. Admitted that to Dan Raphael, but now they're trying to get it Congress to say otherwise. But it's a boxing promotion that's exploited their fighters enough and made enough money to build a training and rehab center. Yeah, I think they have a couple of them, right?
Oh yeah, several now. They keep building them around the world, which is gives them advantage over other MMA promotions.
Right.
But they have they have additional testing that's required, different additional medicals. They have this training facility that's required. They have drug testing, additional minimum amount of ambulance and physicians on site. Ringside presence. They have everything has to come out of the promotion's coffers. Medical coordinator. Additional health coverage outside during training. All these things.
That's novel. That's novel. That's novel.
Well, they do that for the UFC. The UFC fighters get injury coverage for training. So
you don't say.
all these things, all these things exist in the UFC. And my question is, and I've asked some people, no one really has a firm answer on it, but it seems like, okay, this is designed specifically for the UFC and serves, not for the UFC, I should say, for TKO and their new Zuffa boxing, and potentially serves as a barrier to entry for other promotions, because you'd have to, they don't really describe what that PI, institute has to be like, that the UFC has with anybody else, that training center. So maybe, like people said, it's a garage with a couple bags hung up. But they, depending on what that's a cost. The covering healthcare outside of fights is an additional cost. For the UFC, they're already paying for 700 UFC fighters. They could probably get a big discount when they do it and they add a bunch of boxers. Where another promotion has fewer people, probably has a smaller pool of athletes, then they might have a bigger cost. So all these things add greater costs, which I doubt. Small, people are worried that there's just gonna be a ton of belts. I doubt most boxing promoters can meet all the requirements here, and so they won't be able to do it. And so the only ones possible are probably the bigger promoters. But even them, considering how margins are kind of tight for promoters often, that might be a hard hurdle to cross for even some of the bigger promotions.
Yeah, if we were. I haven't listened to your former employer, MMA Draw. I haven't listened to what they have to say, but they've said so much about capture and how governmental capture this and that. And this is totally bespoke, right? And even promoter. I mean, the only promoter who's even talked about this bill has been Jake Paul. And not even Jake Paul, it's Badarian, right? His right-hand man. And he was saying that it would take up to 7 years to build a company to be able to fit all this criteria. And I think you hit on something there in terms of the insurance. You have to have a critical mass of people who are covered for it to be a reasonable price. So I mean, I'm not an insurance expert. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's a good point. But yeah, I mean, it's clearly designed for one specific promoter. Jake Paul's obviously given it some thought. He's amassing more and more female fighters every day. I think there's people have talked about him kind of wanting to do a whole separate women's boxing league. And then, the only other person who's really talked about a league, John, is Turki Al-Sheikh. And certainly Turki Al-Sheikh would have the means to cover all these bases. He could have a training and performance institute built. but or you could just ally with Dana and not have to worry about it.
Yeah. Well, but they already have a deal with the Saudis. They announced it. So that's I imagine that's the plan, is that Turki Al-Sheikh's throwing his weight behind TKO. And that's why they teamed up, because TKO could come up with the idea like this to create a league. And so but I look at how hard is it going to be for the other promotions to create their own UBOs? I think Jake Paul, you said, might. I don't want to, I don't know how much Jake Paul and Nikisa. My understanding is they're very smart guys, but they're not really boxing people, right? And so I don't know if they put as much thought into this as they made it sound like on Twitter one day. The outcome.
Yeah, but I'm questioning. You saying how smart they are. But yeah, go ahead.
No, well, okay, maybe
from the tweets. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Let's Jake Paul. Okay, I retract that he might be, but Nikisa is a very smart guy, business guy. So, but the other promotions. I mean, how hard is it to would be to create their own UBOs, because they would have to cover all those expenses. I mean, they have money coming in, all of them, but again, that's several additional $1 million in expenses per year, probably, just for the insurance.
Or do they, John? Do they have money coming in? We've got Top Rank lost their TV deal. We've got PBC that's supposedly going to be out of the Amazon deal by end of year. I mean, Golden Boy and Jake Paul have deals with DAZN, but DAZN is 10% owned by PIF. So things are really breaking, Zuffa's way.
Conspiracy theories too.
And obviously they have their tentacles all over negotiating with networks as well.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Well, you beat me to it, because conspiracy theorists would say, and this is something that people have suggested to me, that there is some thought that that this is that a lot of the problems broadcast the other promotions have might be partly due to TKO, like especially Top Rank. Top Rank using this ESPN deal, Top Rank, because remember there was that lawsuit filed that a lot of people said, hey, had some, had the fingerprints.
Right. There were rumors that Nick Khan had orchestrated it. Yeah.
There's also the fact that they have this leverage to negotiate with networks because they have Ari Emanuel and all of his properties and WWE and UFC, and now they're in boxing, that they could be, basically throwing up hurdles for other promotions to get on networks or get good deals, because they're the ones, basically saying, hey, you got to negotiate with us or you're going to get on our bad side. And then there's this possible Pied Piper thing where DAZN drew everybody over to the site that no one watches on in America, and they're all dependent on a Saudi influenced company now over there. So everything, maybe that's too much of a conspiracy to say it's being orchestrated, but it definitely seems to be coming out positive for TKO that all this came out their way. And at the same time, when you're dealing with some of the money of the Saudi Arabia and the influence and power of Ari Emanuel, maybe it's not so ridiculous to be thinking conspiracy at this point. Who knows?
You can see the vision is there, right? Like it's definitely dominoes there's still a few dominoes that have to fall, and obviously they're concerned with the Ali Act, right? Because they don't want to compete. They don't want to compete with the other promoters. In essence, they don't want to compete on the playing field as it exists today. They want to create their own thing, have it their own way, like they've had it in mixed martial arts. And they're trying to ram this bill across while they have a political friend in the White House and majorities in both houses of Congress. Now's a really good time, right, to slip this bill in there and get a foothold in boxing, because I think once this domino falls, then they'll make a real push to get Zuffa Boxing, the Zuffa Boxing League, a television deal. But right now, I think everything's a bit on hold until and I can't imagine. There's got to be a little bit of uncertainty. You don't know. Congress is taking a break, right, for August, and
the Epstein thing.
Who knows when this will get passed? It's a little up in the air.
Yep. Okay. So now moving on, does the when you read this, and this is something I think we talked about, and I brought up in the show when I read it, and I think is that I think you might have pointed out to me to be the first person to point it out to me, though, is that it grants an Ali Act exemption, right? If you're a UBO, being a UBO grants you an Ali Act exemption because it's an alternate system, and you're now called a UBO, not a promoter.
It certainly reads that way. If you're promoting a match where all of the fighters are covered, it's a covered fight, right? Where a covered match where the UBO has both fighters under contract. It's an alternative to complying. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that all of these things, it doesn't explicitly say that none of these things apply. And it's interesting because you have a lot of these things like, in New York, they've codified the Ali Act disclosure thing. So it's state law. But, they have this thing in the act where, states can't, they can enact something that's a little extra, but it can't be, in opposition to this amendment. So,
Well,
go ahead.
No, it's because you okay. First of all, it says, like you said, it's because they're a UBO and not a promoter. Like, does disclosure apply to them? Does all these other requirements? But also
does appealing ratings? Which is a really useful tool. I'm sure UFC fighters wish they had.
Well, but I think that definitely doesn't apply because they're not a sanctioning organization. It specifically states they're not a sanctioning organization. They're a UBO. So how do you appeal that? And also because both boxers have to be under contract. So
right.
So that's another thing. Well, if they're under contract already, there's no mandatories, right? There's no coercive contracts. There's no protection against coercive contracts because coercive contracts only protects boxers that are not under contract to you. So even
it's more for options, right?
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So basically, it gives them a free hand to hold the belt and use that to entice people to sign long-term deals, because otherwise you're like, first you have to sign with our UBO even to fight any of our boxers and to potentially go for the title. But if you do not sign, and if you do sign with our UBO, now we can demand, if you want to fight for the title, that you got to sign options or extensions or whatever, and that's not a violation. So all the stuff we talked about previously that might be good for the Ali Act, that seems to be, gives the UBO exemption from all those things.
It appears that way, yeah, because it's an alternative way to comply with the act. I mean, it doesn't really explicitly say that, other than it's an alternative system for compliance with the requirements of the act. But I guess that says enough, right? Like, it's, in other words, if they comply with the rules that they wrote, which basically define the status quo of how they run things in MMA, then all this other stuff that John McCain and others work so hard to get across the finish line to help boxers out from being exploited, it's all out the window. It's all down the drain.
Yeah. Now the other thing is kind of thrown out the window, like we said, is the entire actually boxing ecosystem is thrown out the window, because one is there's no sanctioning organizations, there's no mandatories, right? And there's purse bids are out the window, because there's no ratings criteria. There's no mention of independent ratings in here. So, Mannix was saying something about that. Well, look at the sanctioning body's ratings. It's just what some promoter wants. I'm like, just what some promoter wants? What do you think the UFC is? It's all what the promoter wants. I mean, you can you should complain about sanctioning bodies, but there's no mandatories. There's no, in the UFC, right? And the ratings are just kind of, window dressing, right? I mean, Dana or whoever's making the fights makes the fights they want to make. It doesn't matter where they're rated. And people miss too is purse bids. They're not the ultimate way for fighters to make more money, but that has proven a way for boxers to get more money, because if the negotiations can't happen and they go to purse bid, they basically get to keep all the money. So it has proven a way to increase the competition and amount of money being paid to boxers, right? So
absolutely.
That ecosystem's out. It's the development of boxers change now because of the UBOs. There's just a whole bunch of questions now that I think people think how boxing works would be kind of thrown out, and they should look to the UFC to see how it works right now, because that's the system you'll be having. Although a lot of people, I'm sure, would be celebrating that, which I think is short-sighted. But again, we talk about problem is no co-promotion. I mean, the UBOs, if you read that, seem to define that there cannot be any co-promotion, because they both have to be a functioning UBO. They both have to be under contract. So,
I guess it also says if a UBO contracted fighter fights someone who's not a UBO contracted fighter, I mean, again, nothing's explicit in the bill, but you could certainly, you would definitely make the argument that the Ali Act comes back into play, right?
Yep.
It's not a covered match, right? By definition, in this amendment.
Yep. Now, I guess the other going forward is that when you look at this bill and you look at it, won't the ownership of the title and rank eventually lead to monopolization in boxing? Hasn't that historically been the problem? I mean, isn't that the problem they kept citing with the IBC of New York and in the Ali Act case?
I mean, we have a pretty real world example in the UFC, right? I mean, they just had to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars to fighters.
$375 million and another lawsuit on the way.
I was going to say there have been two, but they're going to consolidate those right into one. I mean, they're going to stuff the one back into the other.
Yeah, well, they might. They haven't. I haven't heard an official decision by the court yet, but that was what they were thinking.
Right.
That Johnson and Sirkunov will be go back into one lawsuit. But people, I mean, that's the problem with I think people are kind of missing is when you have Turkey's money is if you have a self-contained entity and they can pay a ton and get the top boxers in there, then people are going to want to fight those top boxers. In fact, there'll be to be elevated to another level, you'll want to meet those boxers. I mean, look at David Benavidez said he's willing to take almost nothing to fight Canelo Alvarez. So there's a way to entice people to sign with you to fight the top boxers. And as soon as they sign with you, now they're locked in this UBO because you are not bound by the rules, of course, of contracts. And the next person down is going to have the same problem. And eventually you have such a pool of talent, especially you have Turkey behind it, that the network effect comes over and everybody feels the need to sign with that promotion. And that's where that's when you really run into the monopoly problem.
That's where the rubber meets the road, right? It's like, right now they're proposing a very flawed system. Everyone's going in with open eyes. I would hope although some people aren't particularly bright, but in the boxing landscape, you've got one flawed system where there is no monopoly. It's just harem scarum chaos, 4 sanctioning bodies. There's no schedule. The sanctioning bodies kind of make it up as they go along. The promoters don't get along with each other. They fight. So there's that system, and then you've got the other system where fighters are being exploited.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!